The sun was high in the afternoon sky, glinting off the windows of the busy city plaza. People were scattered across the open space, some sitting on benches, others walking with shopping bags, and a few filming the everyday hustle with their phones. A normal day, until something unusual shattered the calm. In the middle of the plaza, a small commotion started to gather attention. A teenage boy, tall and aggressive, shoved his way through the crowd and lunged toward a young girl standing near the fountain. Her eyes widened, and a gasp escaped her lips as the boy's hands grabbed her arm. The girl struggled, her voice breaking through the murmur of the crowd. It didn't take long for people to recognize her, Chuck Norris' daughter. Whispers rippled like a wave. People froze. Phones were raised. Some people stepped back, unsure if they should intervene. Others leaned in closer, drawn by the tension, trying to see what would happen. Chuck Norris, standing a few feet away, tensed immediately. His eyes, calm but piercing, followed every move of the bully. The crowd noticed the sudden shift in his posture, the subtle tightening of his jaw, the quiet way he stepped forward. It was as if the air itself had changed. The light chatter vanished, replaced by a sharp, expectant silence. And then, something unexpected happened. From the edge of the plaza, moving with deliberate calm, came a figure known by everyone who knew martial arts. A legend, a master, a person whose reputation preceded him in whispers and awe. The martial arts master didn't rush. He didn't shout. He walked steadily, eyes locked on the situation. Every step seemed measured, every movement precise. The crowd couldn't take their eyes off him. The tension was electric. The bully tightened his grip, unaware of the storm approaching. The girl's heart pounded in her chest as she looked at the master, a faint flicker of hope sparking in her eyes. The plaza went completely quiet. Even the birds seemed to pause mid-flight. Everyone could feel it. Something was about to happen, but nobody knew what. Would the master strike? Would Chuck Norris intervene first? Or would this escalate into something chaotic and dangerous? Every eye in the plaza was glued to the unfolding drama. Time seemed to stretch. The seconds dragged like hours. And then, in that frozen moment, everyone held their breath, waiting for the first move that could change everything. The city plaza was alive with everyday activity, a tapestry of motion and sound. Street performers played faint melodies on their instruments, blending with the distant hum of traffic. Small groups of tourists snapped photos, children chased each other around benches, and vendors shouted over the ambient noise, selling everything from soft pretzels to colorful balloons. The sunlight reflected off the glass surfaces of nearby stores, creating sharp glimmers that danced across the concrete. On the surface, it was ordinary. Nothing suggested the tension about to erupt. Near the center of the plaza stood a tall, ornate fountain. Water arced gracefully from its tiers, the droplets sparkling like tiny diamonds. It was there that Chuck Norris' daughter had paused, tying her shoe while waiting for her father to finish a quick conversation nearby. She wore a casual jacket and jeans, her hair tied neatly in a ponytail. She was calm, unaware that within seconds, her world would be shaken. The bully, a lanky teenager with a smirk that didn't quite reach his eyes, appeared from the edge of the plaza. He moved with the confidence of someone who thought they could intimidate anyone around them. His backpack hung loosely on one shoulder, but his hands were ready, and the moment he spotted the girl, he lunged. Within seconds, he had her in a tight grip, and the air shifted. A hush fell over the plaza as onlookers turned toward the disturbance. Chuck Norris, standing a few feet away near a small cafe, noticed immediately. His eyes, sharp and calculating, tracked the bully's every movement. He didn't yell, didn't sprint. His presence alone changed the dynamics of the scene. People nearby instinctively stepped back, sensing the aura of authority radiating from him. He was calm but alert, a silent force that made the crowd hold their breath. And then, from the edge of the plaza, another figure entered the scene. He moved with an almost supernatural poise, each step deliberate, like a master composer conducting an orchestra of tension. The martial arts legend was a man whose reputation preceded him, whispered in gyms, mentioned in competitions, known in circles where respect and skill were everything. He wore simple clothing, his movements effortless, yet every gesture commanded attention. The crowd noticed him instantly. A ripple of awe passed through onlookers. Even some of the vendors paused mid-sentence, captivated by the calm authority in his stride. The crowd began to cluster instinctively around the edges, forming a semicircle that allowed them to witness the unfolding drama while keeping a safe distance. Tourists raised their phones, some too afraid to intervene but eager to document the tension. A couple of children clung to their parents' hands, their wide eyes reflecting a mixture of fear and curiosity. Elderly onlookers shifted nervously, whispering to each other, trying to make sense of the situation. Everyone sensed the delicate balance. One wrong move, and the scene could escalate. The plaza's atmosphere was charged, like the moments before a storm. Birds circled overhead, seemingly hesitant to land. The water in the fountain glimmered, droplets catching the sunlight with perfect clarity, frozen mid-air as if time itself had slowed. Small details became magnified: the bully's tightening grip, the girl's subtle struggle, the martial arts master's measured steps, Chuck Norris' unwavering focus. Even the wind seemed to pause, carrying only faint echoes of the crowd's collective breath. In that suspended moment, every person in the plaza was acutely aware of something extraordinary about to unfold. It wasn't just the physical confrontation, it was the clash of presence, of skill, of silent authority that electrified the air. The scene had transformed from a simple public space into a stage where tension, anticipation, and human instinct converged, holding everyone spellbound. And amid this intricate tapestry of sights, sounds, and unspoken energy, one question lingered in the minds of everyone present. What would happen first? The legend's intervention, Chuck Norris' move, or the bully's next reckless action? The answer seemed poised on the edge of possibility, just beyond reach, as the crowd collectively held its breath, waiting for the first ripple to break the stillness of the plaza. The plaza was now a pressure cooker of anticipation. Every eye was locked on the unfolding scene, every heartbeat seemingly synchronized with the tension in the air. The bully's grip on Chuck Norris' daughter tightened slightly, his smirk faltering for just a fraction of a second as he noticed the quiet, commanding figure approaching. The crowd felt it too, an almost imperceptible shift, as if invisible wires of energy were being pulled taut across the plaza. Chuck Norris didn't move hastily. He stepped forward with measured precision, his presence alone radiating authority. His eyes were locked on the bully, sharp and unblinking, yet calm, a silent warning that force would be met with far greater force if necessary. The girl's breathing quickened, her small hands gripping at the bully's arms, but she sensed the arrival of someone even more formidable. From the edge of the plaza, the martial arts legend closed the distance. His movements were deliberate, each step calculated. There was no hurry, no panic, only a focused purpose. He scanned the situation with a predator's precision, noting every detail: the angle of the bully's stance, the tension in his shoulders, the fleeting nervous glances in the crowd. Even without raising his voice, he projected control, and the plaza responded. Whispers grew louder, cameras tilted, and bystanders instinctively stepped back, creating an invisible circle of space. The bully, unaware of the full extent of what was approaching, shifted his weight, preparing for some form of intimidation. His eyes darted nervously between the girl's wide eyes and the martial arts legend's calm stare. Sweat formed on his brow, and for the first time, hesitation crept into his movements. The crowd sensed it, the shift from aggression to uncertainty, the subtle trembling of someone suddenly aware they might be outmatched. Chuck Norris moved closer, his own energy coiling like a spring. He didn't shout, he didn't lunge. His presence alone made the bully reconsider his actions. The girl, sensing both men's protective intent, found a spark of courage, straightening her back slightly, her eyes darting between the two figures. The plaza's atmosphere was electric, thick with tension, as if time had slowed to a crawl. Every small movement became magnified, a slight step forward, a tightening of the hands, a flicker of expression. The martial arts legend raised a single hand, just enough for the bully to see. It wasn't threatening in the conventional sense, no fists, no dramatic gestures, but it carried undeniable authority. The bully froze, caught between fear and pride, unsure whether to retreat, resist, or react. Around them, the crowd leaned in, collectively holding their breath. Phones were raised, recording, but no one dared move closer, drawn into the suspense without risking the delicate balance of the scene. Seconds stretched into moments that felt like minutes. The wind whispered softly through the plaza, carrying the quiet tension to every corner. Even the fountain seemed to pause, the water glimmering mid-arc, droplets suspended like the anticipation itself. People murmured quietly to each other, heads tilted, trying to predict the outcome. Children clutched their parents' hands, their wide eyes reflecting the drama, while older bystanders whispered prayers or cautions. Then came the subtle cue, a shift in posture, a faint tightening of the martial artist's stance. The bully's confidence wavered completely, his bravado crumbling under the weight of controlled authority. Chuck Norris took a step closer, reinforcing the silent message. This was not a game, this was not chaos, this was precision. Every breath, every heartbeat in the plaza aligned toward the same question. What would happen next? The suspense was palpable, layered with fear, anticipation, and awe. Every person watching felt like a participant, sensing the potential for action, but also understanding the power of restraint. It was a test of wills, a moment suspended between chaos and control, where a single move could change everything. The stage was set. All that remained was the first ripple to break the tension, the action, the decision, the moment that would transform fear into relief, curiosity into understanding. The plaza was completely silent now, the usual hum of the city replaced by a thick, almost tangible tension. Every person present felt it, an electric current that ran through the crowd, binding them to the unfolding moment. The bully's grip on Chuck Norris' daughter had loosened slightly, though he didn't yet realize it. People instinctively stepped back, forming a rough semicircle around the trio, creating space without even speaking, a natural perimeter fueled by instinct and fascination. Children clutched the hands of their parents, eyes wide and fixed on the drama. Some hid partially behind legs, peeking cautiously, drawn by curiosity yet wary of the unknown. Their tiny breaths came in quick, anxious gasps, echoing the nervous anticipation of the grown-ups around them. The plaza felt transformed. It was no longer just a public space. It had become a stage, a theater of suspense, where every spectator's heart beat in rhythm with attention at its center. Adults murmured quietly to one another, some pointing toward the approaching martial arts legend. "Who is that?" whispered a vendor, as if speaking louder might break the spell of anticipation. "I've heard of him," another replied, voice barely above a breath. "They say he doesn't even need to fight to control a situation." The crowd clung to these whispers, building an invisible mythology around the man's calm, measured steps. Phones clicked and cameras tilted, capturing every subtle movement, though most of the audience now barely noticed. They were too absorbed in the unspoken narrative unfolding before them. Even Chuck Norris, usually a figure of silent, commanding presence, noticed how the crowd reacted. Eyes darting subtly to the people around him, he observed the spectrum of fear, curiosity, and awe. Their collective tension mirrored his own, a mix of vigilance and anticipation, every instinct alert to the potential for chaos or resolution. In those silent seconds, the plaza's energy felt almost sentient, aware of the stakes, holding its breath along with everyone present. Some of the bystanders shifted uneasily, glancing around for exits or signs of escalation. Elderly couples whispered prayers, their voices a soft undercurrent to the larger suspense. Teenagers leaned against railings, trying to appear nonchalant, though their eyes betrayed the fascination gripping them. Even the street performers, who moments ago had been strumming guitars or juggling, paused mid-motion, their performance suspended by the invisible weight of expectation. The bully, still holding the girl, became acutely aware of the gaze of the plaza. Each glance, each subtle nod of heads, each hushed whisper seemed to amplify his internal tension. Sweat dotted his brow, and his overconfidence began to crack. The martial arts legend continued forward with unbroken calm, observing every flicker of doubt, every micro-expression. His presence alone seemed to stretch time, elongating seconds into moments that felt like eternities to the crowd. People noticed the smallest details, a subtle shift in the legend's stance, the way his hand hovered lightly, the calm way Chuck Norris' body mirrored the scene, reinforcing authority without aggression. It was hypnotic. Murmurs ran through the crowd, some whispering about control, others about skill, many simply holding their breath. Heads tilted in unison, phones paused mid-recording, and every pair of eyes tracked the unfolding drama as if it were the climax of a slow-motion movie. The girl's reaction was equally telling. Her initial fear softened slightly as she sensed the combined protective presence of both men. There was a glimmer of hope in her eyes, a subtle but powerful signal to the crowd. Something was about to change, but no one could yet see how. The spectators leaned forward almost instinctively, drawn to the tension like moths to a flame, eager to witness the moment where the story would finally pivot. Even the environmental details seemed heightened by the crowd's collective focus. The sunlight gleamed off the fountain, water droplets caught mid-air like suspended jewels. Birds circled lazily overhead, hesitant to land. A soft breeze carried the collective murmurs, whispers, and suppressed gasps across the plaza, amplifying the drama without anyone needing to speak louder. Every human reaction, every subtle movement, became magnified in the heightened awareness of the moment. The plaza had become a single organism of suspense. Every spectator, from children to the elderly, from casual tourists to street vendors, was holding a fragment of collective breath. The bully felt it without fully understanding why, a wave of scrutiny that made his bravado falter. Every step the martial arts legend took drew eyes like magnets, every subtle movement observed with near-reverent attention. The tension hung in the air like fog, thick and heavy, waiting for the ripple that would break the stillness, for the first act of resolution that would shift fear into awe. It was in this precise, almost surreal moment that the plaza, the crowd, the girl, and the men became part of a single story, a story suspended in anticipation, where every reaction, every gaze, every whispered speculation added layers to the suspense. And all of them, the onlookers, the girl, the bully, and even Chuck Norris himself, were waiting for that one defining movement that would finally answer the question echoing silently in every mind. What would happen next? The plaza held its collective breath. Every person, from the children clinging to their parents' hands to the elderly couple whispering prayers, felt the weight of the moment. The bully still had a tenuous grip on Chuck Norris' daughter, but the energy around him had shifted. What had once been confidence now trembled on the edge of fear. Every eye was fixed on the approaching martial arts legend, whose measured steps seemed to slow time itself. The legend stopped a few feet from the girl, his presence commanding yet calm. He didn't shout. He didn't make any sudden moves. Instead, he paused, letting the sheer authority of his stance ripple through the plaza. His eyes met the bully's, unblinking and steady, as if silently asking a question. Do you truly understand the consequences of your actions? For a moment, the bully froze entirely. The bravado that had carried him here, that had emboldened him to grab a stranger's daughter in public, cracked completely. The whispers of the crowd grew louder, a subtle chorus that emphasized the gravity of the situation. Parents held their children tighter, their eyes wide with awe, while teenagers and onlookers leaned forward, straining to see what would happen next. The plaza itself seemed to lean in. Chuck Norris took a step closer, positioning himself slightly behind his daughter, a subtle protective presence. Yet he didn't intervene immediately. He understood the weight of the moment. This wasn't just about stopping the bully, it was about demonstrating control, authority, and calm power. Every spectator could feel it, even if they couldn't articulate it. This was a lesson in restraint as much as it was a rescue. The martial arts legend extended one hand, palm open, not in threat but in command. The gesture was precise, almost ritualistic, yet carried undeniable force. The bully's eyes widened, and for the first time, he truly understood that this was no ordinary confrontation. Fear flickered across his face. The crowd could see it, a stark contrast to the arrogance that had defined his approach just moments ago. Then came the subtle movement that would define the entire scene. The legend stepped forward just enough to position himself between the bully and the girl, without any aggression, yet with undeniable authority. The bully, confronted with both physical and psychological mastery, hesitated. His hands, which had been clenched tightly around the girl, loosened involuntarily. She stepped back slightly, gaining a measure of space, and the legend's calm gaze held him in place, unyielding. The moment stretched, frozen in time. Every heartbeat in the plaza seemed synchronized with attention. And then, the twist. Instead of a dramatic strike, a loud scolding, or a physical confrontation, the legend spoke. His voice was low, controlled, carrying clearly across the hushed crowd. Release her. Respect others. Control your actions. The words were simple, yet their weight was profound. The bully, overwhelmed by the authority, the eyes of Chuck Norris, and the silent judgment of the crowd, had no choice. Slowly, almost mechanically, he let go of the girl. She stepped back completely, her breath catching as relief washed over her. The crowd exhaled as one, a collective release of tension so intense it was almost audible. Phones lowered, whispers turned to astonished murmurs, and even the birds seemed to resume their flight, as if the natural order had been restored. Chuck Norris moved forward, placing a reassuring hand on his daughter's shoulder. His expression was calm, approving, a silent acknowledgement of the martial arts legend's intervention. The girl smiled faintly, still shaken, but safe. The bully, meanwhile, slumped, his bravado completely gone, now facing not anger or violence, but a profound lesson in control, consequence, and respect. The crowd's reactions amplified the moment. Some were clapping quietly, unsure if applause was appropriate in such a charged scene. Others whispered phrases like, "Did you see that?" and "That was incredible," marveling at the quiet power of authority and skill without violence. Children pointed, wide-eyed, absorbing the lesson without words. Even the adults nodded slowly, understanding that true strength wasn't about aggression, it was about presence, calm, and knowing exactly how to respond. The martial arts legend didn't linger. He gave a subtle nod to Chuck Norris, then stepped back, melting into the crowd with the same calm precision he had arrived with. It was as if he had never been there, and yet his impact remained etched into the memory of every person present. The plaza seemed to exhale, returning to normal sounds and motion, but the energy was forever changed. People walked away with a story to tell, a story of restraint, courage, and authority that didn't need chaos to make an impression. The bully, now fully aware of the lesson, slouched toward the edge of the plaza, no longer daring to meet anyone's eyes. The girl, surrounded by the quiet protection of her father, smiled faintly, understanding not only that she was safe, but that she had witnessed something extraordinary, a demonstration of strength without violence, wisdom without words, and authority without fear. In that moment, the plaza, the crowd, the girl, and the men became part of a single story, a story of suspense, tension, and ultimately, resolution. It wasn't the physical confrontation that defined it. It was the mastery of presence, control, and calm power that left everyone, from children to elders, in awe, a lesson that would linger far longer than the seconds it took to unfold. As the plaza slowly returned to its usual rhythm, the memory of the incident lingered like a quiet echo. Street performers resumed their music, children's laughter floated across the open space, and the distant hum of traffic filled the background once more. Yet, for everyone who had witnessed what had just transpired, nothing could feel normal again. The moment had left an indelible mark, a demonstration of power, restraint, and wisdom that would linger far longer than the brief seconds it took to unfold. One of the most striking lessons was about true strength. So often, people equate strength with aggression, with loud actions, dramatic confrontations, or displays of dominance. Yet, in that plaza, everyone had witnessed something completely different. Strength had not been measured by force or volume. It had been measured by presence, control, and timing. The martial arts legend had intervened without throwing a punch, without making a scene, without instilling fear through violence. And yet, the effect was absolute. The bully's aggression dissolved, replaced by understanding and caution. True strength, the audience realized, isn't about overpowering others. It's about commanding respect with clarity, confidence, and calm. Another lesson was about the power of restraint. In a world where immediate reaction often seems like the only option, the legend's approach was deliberate, measured, and precise. Every step, every gesture, every word had been intentional. He didn't act out of anger or impulse. He assessed, waited, and intervened only when it would have the maximum impact with the minimum conflict. The lesson was clear. Sometimes the most powerful action is the one you don't take immediately. Patience, observation, and restraint are often far more effective than hasty aggression. The audience also saw the importance of psychological awareness. The bully had initially thought that physical intimidation would give him control. Yet, he was unaware of the layers of authority surrounding him. Chuck Norris' protective presence, the calm confidence of the martial arts legend, and the silent but expectant crowd. Every detail, stance, gaze, tone, and posture, contributed to a narrative that made the bully realize his mistake without a single violent act. People watching understood that influence and authority often rely on presence and perception rather than confrontation. A calm, confident demeanor can alter the course of an entire situation. Furthermore, the incident highlighted the impact of human connection and protection. The daughter's safety was ensured not just by physical skill, but by a network of support, awareness, and vigilance. Chuck Norris' quiet readiness, combined with the legend's calculated intervention, created an environment where harm was impossible. The lesson here extends beyond martial arts. In life, protecting those around you requires attentiveness, courage, and the willingness to act responsibly, not recklessly. True protection is about anticipation and wisdom as much as action. The crowd, too, learned something profound. They had been passive witnesses, yet their reactions contributed to the resolution. By holding back, creating space, and observing attentively, They allowed the situation to unfold without interference that could have escalated it. Their collective awareness had amplified the impact of the legend's intervention. In a sense, everyone in that plaza participated in a subtle lesson. Sometimes the best support is calm, respectful presence rather than direct action. Even for the bully, the lesson was transformative. He experienced firsthand that consequences do not always require aggression to be effective. He realized the weight of his actions and the power of respect, authority, and wisdom. His bravado had crumbled not because of force, but because of the undeniable influence of measured, controlled, and deliberate action. Moments like this demonstrate that discipline and insight can be far more persuasive than intimidation or chaos. The plaza itself became a classroom, teaching all who had witnessed the scene that day that wisdom and calm control are timeless virtues. People left with reflections that extended beyond the incident, that patience can resolve conflict, that authority doesn't need aggression, and that courage often shows itself in subtle, disciplined ways rather than dramatic outbursts. The lesson wasn't just about martial arts. It was about human behavior, interpersonal dynamics, and the power of calm, decisive action in any situation. Ultimately, what lingered most was inspiration. Children, teenagers, adults, and the elderly all carried with them a silent acknowledgement of what had occurred. Strength without violence, intervention with restraint, courage with wisdom, these were the takeaways that resonated. People reflected quietly on their own lives. How could they exercise patience in moments of conflict? How could they embody authority without aggression? How could they protect, guide, and influence positively in their own environments? In that plaza, a single moment of tension had become a profound lesson in presence, restraint, and human dignity. And it reminded everyone that real power is subtle, deliberate, and intentional, a force that can change minds, protect the vulnerable, and inspire generations without a single dramatic strike. The plaza had slowly returned to its usual rhythm, birds chirping, children laughing, the distant hum of traffic and casual chatter filling the air once more. Yet, for those who had witnessed the incident, nothing could ever feel truly ordinary again. Every person carried the memory of the scene, a bully confronted not with chaos or violence, but with calm, calculated authority, a daughter protected not by spectacle, but by the quiet precision of skill and awareness, a crowd transformed from passive bystanders into participants in an extraordinary moment of human restraint and wisdom. As people began to leave, some in awe, others in quiet reflection, a sense of shared experience lingered. You could see it in the subtle nods exchanged between strangers, in the hushed whispers of amazement, in the children mimicking the stance of the martial arts legend as they walked alongside their parents. It wasn't just a story they had witnessed, it had become something more profound, a lesson etched into the fabric of the day, something that would ripple far beyond the plaza's boundaries. This is where the power of reflection comes in. Every person who had observed the scene was now thinking about their own approach to conflict, to authority, to strength. The bully, for instance, had learned a life-altering lesson in restraint, presence, and respect, realizing that raw aggression can never overpower controlled wisdom. Chuck Norris' daughter experienced firsthand that courage doesn't mean facing danger alone. It means trusting in those who act responsibly, who intervene with skill and thoughtfulness. And the crowd, ordinary people who had simply been present, understood a subtle truth. Sometimes the most profound lessons are observed, not enacted. They had witnessed an example of strength without force, influence without intimidation, and authority without fear. For you, watching this unfold, there's a lesson too. Life is filled with plazas, moments of tension, uncertainty, and potential conflict. They may not involve bullies or martial arts legends, but they often demand the same virtues: patience, awareness, measured action, and the courage to step forward when needed. How do we respond when faced with challenges? Do we act impulsively, reacting with anger or fear? Or do we pause, assess, and respond with thoughtful authority, just as the legend did in the plaza? The story reminds us that true power lies in calm, precise action, not in spectacle or chaos. And there's another layer here, the influence of the collective. The crowd, in their attentive silence, played a role in the resolution of the scene. Their presence, their restraint, and their focus amplified the authority of those intervening. In real life, the way people around us observe, react, or support can subtly shape outcomes. There's power in mindful participation, in stepping back while staying aware, in creating space for resolution without escalating tension. Every viewer, every participant, becomes part of the larger narrative, whether in a public plaza or in the metaphorical plazas of daily life. Take a moment to reflect on your own experiences. Think of times when you faced situations that could have spiraled into conflict. How could a calm, measured approach have changed the outcome? How might patience, observation, and precise action have allowed you to influence events without aggression? This story isn't just entertainment. It's an invitation to self-reflection, an encouragement to consider how presence, restraint, and wisdom can be applied in everyday life. And yet, perhaps the most profound lesson is this: courage isn't always loud. Strength isn't always visible. Influence doesn't require confrontation. The martial arts legend arrived, the bully relented, and the girl was protected, all without chaos, all without spectacle. It was subtle, deliberate, and masterful. And in that subtlety lies a lesson that resonates far beyond a single plaza or moment in time. True mastery is quiet, precise, and impactful in ways that words and brute force cannot match. Now, imagine carrying this lesson into your life. How can you embody calm authority in tense situations? How can you protect and guide those around you without creating unnecessary conflict? How can observation, patience, and presence become your tools for influence? These are the questions that linger after the spectacle has passed, the questions that invite growth, reflection, and even transformation. For those watching, here's an opportunity to engage. Think about the moment in the plaza, the pause before the legend's intervention, the subtle gestures that shifted the bully's mindset, the collective awareness of the crowd. Which part struck you most? Was it the calm authority of the martial arts legend? The quiet protective presence of Chuck Norris? The way the crowd's attention shaped the outcome? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your reflections are part of the story now. Every comment, every discussion, extends the impact of this moment far beyond a single afternoon in a public plaza. And if this story inspires you, consider sharing it. Share it with friends, family, or anyone who could benefit from seeing a demonstration of courage without aggression, influence without intimidation, and strength without chaos. Let it spark conversations about how we respond to challenges, how we exercise authority, and how we protect and guide those around us. Let it remind us that the quietest moments often carry the deepest lessons. Finally, reflect on this simple truth. Presence, restraint, and calm authority are timeless virtues. They shape not just individual moments, but entire lives. They teach us to act wisely, to observe keenly, and to influence subtly. They remind us that courage and strength are not measured by the loudness of action, but by the impact of intention. As you leave this story in your mind, carry it forward, in your words, your actions, and your presence in the world. The plaza may have returned to its normal rhythm, but for everyone who experienced it, the lesson would resonate forever. And now, as part of this story, you too can carry it forward.